Welcome to this class on the methods of economic analysis with a focus on the economic cost-benefit analysis. This is part 2 of the classes on economic cost-benefit analysis. The class today is organized as follows. First of all, we'll look at the phases of the UNIDO ACBA methodology. Then we'll analyze more in depth tangible and intangible benefits and costs of a project. We'll look at adjustment factors that are typically employed for ECBA for specific items. And then we'll have a final discussion about the economic net present value, also in the light of the definition of the consumption rate of interest. So these are the phases of UNIDO ACBA methodology. First phase is preliminary price adjustments. So here we are basically identifying the resources that are employed in the project. We are identifying the real and financial flows that the project is generating for the commercial perspective. And then we identify those items that are to be adjusted, and so we start the preliminary adjustments to determine the shadow prices, and we correct for the presence of externalities. So practically passing from here to here, we are first analyzing the project within the perspective of the investor, so with a specific reference to the real and financial flows, and then we correct the eventual distortions, and then we identify and account and quantify externalities of the project. Then phase 2 is the adjustment for the shadow exchange rate. As we discussed in the previous classes, this is needed where the official rate of foreign exchange is distorted. It does not represent the economic value of the foreign exchange. And we already discussed the methods for adjusting the official exchange rate and path from the official exchange rate to the shadow exchange rate. So this is something that has already been analyzed and typically is done within the UNIDO methodology after preliminary price adjustments. Then we have the income flow analysis that is we saw in the previous class. It's part of social analysis. So in this case, we identify the relevant social groups that are interested in the projects. We attribute to each social group the gains and losses of a project, and then for each social group we sum gains and losses of the project, and this allows you to determine what is the impact of the project for different social groups, and there will be a weighting methodology to, as we'll see in the adjustment factors, to assess in the end the social value of the project. Then we have phase number 4, that is about the distribution of benefits over generations. Well, this topic, as we have already discussed in previous classes, is mainly related to the savings issue. So if the current generations invest more now, and so they renounce to consumption, there will be more consumption for future generations. So each time an investment is requiring the use of resources for the current generation, then this will be reflected into higher consumption of the future generation. So the phase 4 is concerned about the adjustment for the value of savings. So we have to account for correct value of saving, and it has to do with the analysis of the marginal saving propensity. Phase 5 is about distribution of benefits, not over generation, but among contemporaries. So again, here we have to look at distribution weights and to account to analyze how these distribution weights across social group account on the final performance of the project. So as we said, in phase 2 we are interested in understanding who is gaining and who is losing from this project in terms of social groups, and here instead we are specifically measuring the weights, the adjustment factors that allow us in the end to determine a weighted outcome of the project that also accounts for distribution effects of the projects. And finally, you have the inclusion of merits and demerits of a project with respect to general national policies and goals. These are merits and demerits that have not been included in the previous phases of the analysis, so they are analyzing at the last step of the analysis. And they can refer to general objectives such as regional development, use of strategic resources, creation of new jobs, so reduction of unemployment, industrialization policies, especially at regional level. So if you want to, if the project contributes to development of economic development of the economic situation of specific regions, or if there are specific environmental goals or other goals or policies, this point we are considering these merits and demerits as bonuses or minus of the project before the final economic appraisal. So at this point we can give a more precise look at tangible and intangible benefits and costs of projects that are related basically to the understanding of real and financial flows that the project is generating for the investors and for the economic system as well. So first of all, among tangible benefits, you have the primary tangible benefits. These are the marketed outputs that are therefore used by consumers and bought on the market. Or you could have some output that is not marketed but has anyhow a direct impact on the economy. Let's think, for example, about an irrigation system that is not marketed but is immediate tangible benefits that will contribute to the development of agriculture in that particular region. Then there are indirect benefits that can take the form of upstream linkages and downstream linkages. So in the case of upstream linkages, this means that the project has not only an impact in terms of the outputs directly generated by the products, but also on the supply of raw materials. So the fact that you're increasing the production of a given output will also increase the supply for the raw materials at the local level. So the raw materials that are used by the producer for the generation of the outputs of interest. In the case of downstream linkages, instead, we are talking about indirect effects that the project has on downstream markets. So just to make an example, let's imagine that you are increasing the local production of cotton. This could have also a downstream impact on the market, on the production of textiles in the industry. Or let's assume that you're increasing the production of crude oil. This could also impact on the downstream industry of refining. So this means that when you look at a project, at the tangible benefits of a project from a wider economic perspective, and not only the direct outputs of so direct tangible benefits of the project matters, but also the indirect benefits in terms of output that you have in both the upstream market and the downstream market, as we have just discussed. Then you have secondary benefits that are related to externalities. So the impact that the technology can have on the development of a country, or the negative externalities that a project can have in terms of environmental concerns and so on. Then there are employment benefits that are related to reduction of unemployment, creation of new jobs, and so again we have a tangible benefit for a given national goal. And finally, you could have an increase in foreign exchange reserves if the country where the project should be implemented has problem with this kind of issue. Clearly, a project is also intangible or non-monetary benefits that could be also relevant for the analysis of the project from an economic point of view. These are not immediately observable, but and they're not a tangible aspect, but they could be important anyhow for the achievement of specific goals of a country. And so we have among the intangible monetary benefits and costs, a balanced regional development. So when a country is characterized by an imbalance of development across regions, the fact that a project contributes to the equilibrium and to a better balance is clearly an important benefit, even though it's a non-monetary nature. An environmental improvement, so if a project has a positive impact on the environment, this is something that you cannot quantify, you could not quantify from a monetary point of view, but it's clearly an important merit of the project. You could have an improvement in income distribution, so again you could reduce the disparities between social groups in terms of income, and therefore attain a social objective that again is non-monetary nature, but it could be highly relevant for the social analysis of this project and for the social goals of a given nation or region. Then we could have impacts on life protection, in particular on what is concerned about working conditions and in general living conditions that reduce mortality in the country. This is clearly another critical intangible output, intangible because it's not immediately quantifiable, but it's surely an important potential results in terms of national and regional goals. And finally, there are some countries that are more concerned about this problem, the preservation of historic sites and artifacts. So any project that is not necessarily an economic impact, but is the objective of valorizing the historic sites and artifacts could be important for a government. Then you could have a project that combines both the economic and so the monetary and non-monetary benefits. For example, you could have a project for the valorization of a given historical site. This could have private benefits in terms of commercial analysis because of the higher flow of incoming tourists, but clearly is also a goal, is also a result and output that goes beyond the commercial result and is to do with non-monetary benefits related to historic preservation of sites and artifacts. In the same way, clearly a project is generating both tangible and intangible or non-monetary cost. As concerned the main tangible costs of a project, we have again primary costs that are mainly related to the value of the resources that are used in the project. Then you have indirect costs that are related to the impact that you have on upstream or downstream linkages. So you could have a project that is a positive output it's a positive, tangible and marketable output, but then is a reduction, implies a reduction in the outputs of the downstream or upstream markets. This is clearly not important for the private investor, but it's surely important for the national goals, and therefore you have also indirect costs that are related to these kind of effects. Then you have secondary costs that are again related to network externalities. Again, an impact. The project could have a positive impact on GDP of the country, but could have negative externalities in terms of social distribution, social costs, or environmental negative impact. And clearly, again, these are topics that are not of interest to the investors, the private investors for the project, but become relevant for the national or regional government. And then you have the cost of unemployment. Again, you cannot measure from a quantitative point of view the cost of having unemployment, but this is clearly a social cost for a country that is often non-monetary in nature, but is really an important aspect. Because you could, for example, invest in a project that adopts a more efficient technology. So you are reducing the use of scarce resources. Because of that, the process is more efficient. But at the same time, the process could need less workers. So there is a positive benefit both for the investors that is related to the financial value created by the project, also for potentially for economic value, because it could happen that the project, by using less resources, creates higher economic value. But clearly, by using less employees, if these employees have not an alternative employment, this creates a cost of unemployment that is to be considered within an economic perspective in the valuation of the project. And then you have intangible or non-monetary costs that again are not relevant for the calculation of the financial or economic value of the project, but are anyhow important in terms of social effects. And so we can refer to them as intangible or non-monetary costs. First of all, you could have industrial project that determines environmental degradation. This is clearly a negative externalities of which government should be aware. They should be assessed in the determination of economic cost-benefit analysis, as well as disruption of ecosystems. You could have exacerbation of income disparities, and this is because it could happen that in terms of income distribution, the costs are mainly paid by some social group that is more disadvantaged, and the benefits mainly accrue a social group that instead is wealthier. And in this case, even though the project is generating a positive impact on economic national income, on economic variables such as national incomes or GDP, the fact that it generates an exacerbation of disparities is surely a cost that is to be accounted for, and it could also lead to the decision of not adopting the project, even though this is creating economic value. Then you have hazards to health and well-being of population. So, for example, a new industrial site could produce toxic emissions that could be dangerous for the health of the population living nearby, and clearly sometimes you can measure the economic value of this kind of costs only in the long term, but even though this cost is not monetary in nature, is something that you should consider in the ECBA process. The project could bring to disruption of cultural values of lifestyles, and in particular to disruption of traditions of the people that are affected by the execution of the project. And you could have destruction of historic sites and artifacts. So it's exactly the opposite example that we made when we talk about intangible benefits of a project. And you could have an inconsistency with the overall development plan, in the sense that a nation, a government, a national government, or regional government could have for a given area an overall development plan. And then you evaluate a project. This project is evaluated with all the externalities, but the inclusion of externalities could not necessarily affect the full consistency between the project and the more general economic development plan that has been defined for that particular region. So for example, it could happen that you decide to develop an industrial site with a positive financial impact, a positive economic impact, a positive impact on employment, but in an area that has been mainly devoted in the development plan to tourism. So in this case, clearly the project will be beneficial for both financial and economic reasons, but clearly being inconsistent with the overall development plan could have negative externalities that should be accounted for. And if it's not possible to account for them from a quantitative point of view, you should consider the intangible costs represented by the inconsistency with the overall development plan. So now we can look at real and financial flows that are involved in the project, this is something that we have already discussed in the previous classes, but it is important to recall this part also for the economic cost and benefit analysis. So the real flows are represented because they are mainly concerned, they are really important and critical for the understanding of the scarce resources that you are using for this project and for the economic value and appraisal. So typically real flows that are used by the project are represented by raw materials, semi-finished goods, land, capital goods, and labor. The financial flows instead are represented by equity funds, loans and debt service, taxes, dividends, and etc. So we already saw that in the financial analysis that when you fund a project, you can have different financing sources. These are represented by the investors of the shareholders that are the equity funds, by loans and debt services, loans raised by banks and other investors, and by debt service. That means that you pay back the loans and the interest to the investors, by the payment of taxes, by eventual payment of dividends to shareholders, and so on. So these real financial flows are included in the economic cost-benefit analysis because they are part of the commercial analysis of a project, but then clearly are subject to all the adjustments that we have extensively discussed in the previous classes. So now we can look at the adjustment factors that are used in order to account for this impact of a project on income distribution and intertemporal distribution of the benefits. So a phase adjustment factor that is often used refers to the income distribution. So here we have the adjustment factor for income distribution. And the formula is represented in these slides and is equal to WI, where WI is weighting factor for social group I, equal to the ratio between B, that is base level of consumption, and we'll define in a moment what we mean for base level of consumption, and CI is the actual consumption level of social group I, raised to N, where N represents the elasticity of marginal utility of consumption with respect to change in per capita income. And so this is a parameter that we already considered for the calculation of the consumption rate of interest. So let's try to understand what is the meaning of this indicator. So B is the base level of consumption that is defined as level for which government is indifferent to unit of income in the hands of the social group or in the hands of the government. So this means that this is the level of consumption that the social group will have if it's in equilibrium. And so in this case, it's a social group that is not receiving subsidies and it's an equilibrium level of consumption. Whereas the CI is the actual consumption level of the social group. So the WI is the weighting factor for social group I in particular that basically expresses the need to increase the consumption for this particular group. This need is clearly depending on the elasticity of marginal utility of consumption with respect to change in per capita income. So N is a very difficult parameter to be estimated, but typically this is estimated in a range going from 0 to 2. So 0 is the minimum, 2 is typically the maximum value that is accepted for N. The 0 means that there is no elasticity of marginal utility of consumption, so basically there is no need of further consumption for all social groups, so even increasing the per capita income, there is no increase in the utility of consumption. So here, this means that N is equal to 0, so the total weighting factor independently of the value of B and CI will be equal to 1, and so there is no need for adjustment. The weighting factor will be equal to 1, and so there is no need for adjustment. And so any increased unit of income going to social group I is not higher or lower utility than the same unit of income accruing to a different social group. So this is the basic meaning. When N is equal to 1, then there is some marginal utility of consumption, so it's important to look at this ratio. So this means that if CI is lower than the base level of consumption, this group actually is consuming less than the equilibrium level. So it's a group that should consume more than the equilibrium level to fill the gap. So to again having a level of consumption that is the equilibrium one. And so this means that WI will be higher than 1. So anytime that the group is consuming less than the equilibrium level and N is higher than 0, this means that there will be some weighting factor higher than 1. Clearly, the same is true. If the opposite condition holds. This means that if B is lower than CI, so if this group is consuming more than base level of consumption and N is higher than 0, the WI weighting factor will be lower than 1. This means that any unit of income accruing to this social group is less important than the same unit of income accruing to a social group that instead is lower, is consuming less than the equilibrium level, and for which therefore this weighting factor is higher than 1. In the case of maximum elasticity, so when there is really a strong marginal utility of consumption per unit of per capita income, this means that the eventual imbalances are particularly important, also in terms of weighting factor. Because let's take a simple example. Let's assume that this ratio is equal to 2. So this means that the actual level of consumption of social group I is half of the equilibrium level. So in order to have an equilibrium level for this social group should double the level of consumption. If N is equal to 0, so if the social group is no marginal utility of consumption, then you don't need to adjust that, and in fact the weighting factor will be equal to 1, and any unit of income accruing to any social group will have the same value. But if N is equal to 1, so if there is a marginal utility of consumption and this ratio is equal to 2, then the weighting factor I will be equal to 2. This means that the additional unit of per capita income accruing to this group I is double impact for the economic value of the project as compared to a social group that is instead a ratio equal to 1, so a group that is in equilibrium in other words. But if n is equal to 2, so when there is an extreme marginal utility of consumption, so that any per unit income any unit of per capita income is generating a very high marginal utility of consumption, the weighting factor will be equal to 2 raised to 2, so it will be equal to 4. So this means that the weighting factor will be much higher than what we had with n equal to 1, and this signals an extreme necessity of this social group to increase the level of consumption. So this adjustment factor is very useful because when you have also a social objective of income distribution. Because if you just focus on the economic analysis, this economic analysis will say to you, for example, how the project will impact on the national income. This does not account clearly for how this income is distributed. But when you instead, after performing this kind of analysis, you ask, but what are the groups that benefit from this increase in national income? And you calculate the adjustment factor for each of these groups, and in the end, you don't consider just the aggregated result, but you consider the weighted average result accounting for the adjustment factor. You will have a final output that also reflects the importance of the creation of additional income for different social groups, in particular for groups that are disadvantaged. So these weighting factors allow the evaluator to assess not only the impact of the project on income as general measure of economic result, but also now this income is distributed across groups, and in particular if in the end this income accrues to groups that need more consumption than others. So if in the end you're not only satisfying economic objective, but you are also satisfying the social objectives of equity in income distribution. A second adjustment factor is for saving, and this is related to the problem of intertemporal distribution of the benefits of a project. So savings are the basis for investment, so leading to future consumption. So here the logic is that the more you invest today, so the more you save today, the more consumption will be available for future generations. So here we have an adjustment factor for savings that is AFS, that is calculated as represented, the formula represented in this slide. So it's equal to 1 minus S, where S is the marginal propensity to save for group I, multiplied by Q, where Q is the marginal productivity of capital, divided by I, where I is the consumption rate of interest, that had also been defined as CRI, consumption rate of interest, in the previous class, minus S, that is again the marginal propensity to save for the group, and Q is again the marginal productivity of capital minus 1. So this is derived as value of an infinite series of consumption benefits arising from a unit of savings of a social group. And so this expresses the value of saving 1 unit of income on the future benefits. So in the end, this factor allows you to compare what is the future benefit of 1 additional unit of saving with the decision of foregoing actual consumption. So this is a way to understand how the intergenerational effect of an additional unit of saving compare to the actual decision of consumption for the actual generation. So this is another important adjustment factor that is not used for income distribution across contemporaries, but to assess the distribution of benefits of a project over generations. So the final topic of this class is economic net present values versus consumption rate of interest. So the main topic here is that, as we have discussed also in previous classes, a project typically generates benefits of different nature over quite a long period of time. You could define in a more precise way what is the life of the direct benefits and the tangible outputs of the project. But the project could generate indirect effects like externalities also for a longer time, and if you're able to assess that, you could have a very long-term perspective in evaluation. And as we said several times since when we dealt with the problem in the financial analysis, benefits that refer to different moments of time are not directly comparable. So in order to make comparable, you have to discount them and determine a net present value. That is the value of all the net benefits that will be generated by the project over its life, but discounted to the present moment. So in this way, by discounting all the benefits to the present moment, you make them comparable also from a timing point of view. So after all adjustments are made in the real and financial flows, the results can be calculated by discounting the net benefits at the social discount rate. So in other words, we are determining the net present value of all the net benefits of the project over its life by discounting them using a given discount rate. So now the main issue here is determination of the social discount rate, and here we cannot refer, as we've seen for the financial analysis, to the cost of capital. That only reflects the expected return of the investors. So here we have to refer instead to what we have already defined as a consumption rate of interest that can now represent a measure of the social discount rate, and that, as we have seen, reflects the time preference for consumption and the marginal utility of consumption to an increase in per capita income. Therefore, the logic of discounting is the same and can be used to determine net present value also within the setting of economic cost-benefit analysis. But the determination of this discount rate is very different because it does not account the expectational returns of investors, but considers instead the preference for consumption that are observable in a given economic system. So with that, we have finished the economic cost-benefit analysis. We have finished this class. So I thank you for your attention, and as usual, I remind you that for any additional material about the topics of this class, you can refer to the course website. Thank you.